Robert Greene is the author of 6 international bestsellers. He's known for his writing on strategy, power, seduction, and mastery. I personally admire his work and have gotten great benefit from it. Few writers have the capability to craft a material that is both wise and fascinating at the same time. His books provide deep insight into the human experience and are at the same time extremely engaging as he has mastered the craft of storytelling. This podcast is sponsored by me. Please go to joshterryplays.com to see what I'm up to. Okay, here we are. Robert, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Josh. My pleasure. I'm honored to be here.
I really couldn't help myself in the beginning of this. And I feel like I have to start right where you started in the 48 Laws of Power. The introduction to the 48 Laws of Power is one of the best introductions I've ever read.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
It really grabbed me right away. And I wanted to start because I think it lays a foundation for a lot of things with the idea of a tool being neither good or bad, but simply existing. And I
Hmm.
just wanted to open up the conversation with that. Would you be open to talking a bit about that?
Yes. Well, some people will wonder, is power an ethical arena? Is there something moral about power? Is it do you get power by being good and virtuous? And my answer to that, having read a lot of history and having a lot of experiences, is that it's kind of not in the equation. So, in other words, people can be very good and decent and honorable, and they can attain positions of power. I can consider someone like an Abraham Lincoln or a Gandhi in that vein or something like that. But there are plenty of good, virtuous, upright, decent people who get no power at all, right? And then there are people who are just definitely evil and conniving and manipulative. Some of them don't get power because they go too far and they alienate too many people, but some of them go through life and they sail through and they have lots of power and fame and they do very well for themselves. So to answer the question, is it doesn't depend on your virtue or on the lack of your virtue. It depends on your knowledge of power. So it's this other realm, and it has to do with psychology and understanding people and understanding that not everyone out there has your best interest in mind. So sometimes you have to play defense, and sometimes you have to know how to create the right appearances because we are animals that tend to judge people and things by their appearances. So you have to kind of craft your own image and appear in a certain vein that is very powerful. You have to learn the kind of mistakes, the common mistakes to avoid, and how to surprise and excite people around you. These are all strategies and tactics and laws that I go into very deeply in the 48 Laws of Power. And I'm afraid they have nothing to do whether you're a good or bad person. It is, as you put it out, and as I point out in the introduction, it is an instrument that you can use to advance your career. And what I notice in the world is that a lot of artists, I know a lot of artists. My girlfriend, she's a filmmaker and an artist, and I sort of started out as somebody who wrote novels and plays. Is that people like that tend to be a bit naive. They have a lot of talent. They can usually be nice people, agreeable people, decent people, whatever, but not necessarily, not all artists are like that. And they suffer a lot because of their naivete, because they don't understand that they also have to play a political game. So the art world, the film world, the music industry, these are all very Machiavellian environments. And you're not going to get ahead and succeed just by your brilliance and creativity. You have to understand the game of power. It's an instrument, it's a tool. That rock could be used for creating a fire and doing something brilliant, or it could be used to murder somebody. It just depends on how you use it and what you're using it for.
I believe there's a real problem with resentment in our world. And I think
Definitely.
resentment is a very dangerous thing. I mean, it's always been dangerous in my mind whenever it's started to crop up. It's
Yeah.
one of the more troublesome things in the world.
Yeah.
And something that I believe is that when we are stronger, uh, we tend to be able to create a situation where we are less resentful.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yes. I mean, one of the things I talk about in the introduction, to go back to that, is we have a fundamental need for power as a human being. The idea, and I equate power with the sense of expansion, that I have the ability to expand beyond my usual limits. So that means in my career, I have opportunities to grow and move. I have mobility. I have some freedom. It means that I can work with people and I understand they're not continually putting up obstacles. I know how to work around those obstacles. This desire for freedom, mobility, and expansion is what I consider power, and it's deeply, deeply embedded in our nature. And so what I say are, everybody wants this, but there are people who deny it. People who say, "I'm not interested in power. It's too ugly. It's, I'm just want to be myself. I just want to be good to people, etc." And there are people like that, and I have nothing against it. But a lot of people who claim to be what I call non-players in the game of power are actually at heart very passive aggressive, right? And they have a lot of what you consider resentment. And if you ever look at your own resentments, because we all have resentment, I have it, it's a very common emotion. Underneath that resentment tends to be a great deal of anger. We're angry about something, we're frustrated about something, right? So you have one or two options. You can understand that emotion, you can understand that there's something frustrating you, there's an obstacle in your path, and it's making you resentful. How do you deal with it? You understand you're feeling that way. Okay, I'm going to deal with it based on the 48 laws of power, whatever. I'm going to be strategic. Or you can take the opposite feeling and just blame other people and be angry. So the resentful attitude tends to blame everybody else but yourself for the problem that you're facing, right? And so instead of like trying to solve an issue or trying to figure out what it is and to be strategic, you end up being passive aggressive. You play kind of negative games of power. You use the fact that you are weak in a situation and you try and leverage it for power. And you whine and you complain. Nothing ever really changes. So the point of the book is to be able to be realistic about yourself and about the world, and to confront the fact that if you are resentful, if you feel this resentment about a person or some force in the world, something political or whatever, the next step is to say, why am I resentful? Why am I feeling this? What is the source of it? Is it perhaps coming from me? Or if it's in the world, what is the nature of it? And then to be able to take practical, strategic action to solve the problem. That's what I'm advocating in the 48 Laws of Power, as opposed to playing kind of negative, virtuous games and pretending that you're not interested in power at all, which is a form of power.
Connecting to a lot of the rest of your work, I think this still has relevance where we look at a lot of ideas that people suggest as ways to improve ourselves, ways to make a change, and we make immediate judgments on them by themselves. So oh, this type of behavior is evil. This type of thing is a manipulation that is wrong. This type of thing is not the way you should achieve your goal. I think that takes out the real important factor, which is that what the actual goal is, what the desire is. So, is a lot of your work dependent on the context of what people want?
Well, you have to be clear about what you want in your life and the goals. So I'm a very practical person. And if I think that there's something that needs to be changed or there's something that bothers me, my first thought is, what is the way to achieve my goal, right? I need clarity. And those goals are embedded, there's a context to them, they're embedded in my life as a whole. So some goals aren't really worth it. Some battles are not worth it because they don't lead to anything that's going to help me 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road. And a lot of drama that people stir up and a lot of battles that get us all roiled up and then we get sucked into it, I often find that it wastes a lot of time and it doesn't lead to anything that I want, doesn't lead to the results that I want. So the main thing in life is to be clear about your goals, about what really matters to you, about what your priorities are. And I like to start that from a very basic level. In Mastery, my book Mastery, I try and say, what is it that you were intended to create in life? What is what I call your life's task? What is it that is like fulfilling your destiny? This kind of career, this kind of book, this kind of podcast, that's in line for who I am and what I was meant to create. And that creates an incredible amount of clarity. So I know that, for instance, I want to write books. That's what gives me pleasure. And people come to me left, right, and center. Well, let's, Robert, start a podcast. Robert, do an audiobook series. And I go, no, that's just not, it's just going to add on. It's going to make me more distracted. It's not what I need. So knowing who you are, knowing what your goals are, gives you the clarity, gives you kind of context for your life as a whole, and then you can aim for it. But a lot of people don't have that clarity. They're kind of wandering around. They don't know really what they want. And at the root of that, at the root of not knowing what you want and how to achieve it, is you don't understand yourself. So I talk a lot, particularly in my last couple of books, about the very importance of having self-awareness, of understanding what really matters to you, what your destiny is in life, and what you were meant to achieve in some fashion, right? And it gives you a kind of inner radar to know, this person bothering me or this supposed enemy, it's not worth a battle because it doesn't lead to what I want, right? So I see a lot of people, and a lot of the consulting that I do is I try and make people understand what you're trying to do right now isn't worth it. Okay, what is it that you actually want to achieve? All right, let's figure out steps, strategies for actually getting to something that will matter to you in 2 or 3 or 4 years with a degree of flexibility. You know, the main thing that we want in life is results. We're practical we're practical animals. We don't want to just simply whine and complain and feel sorry for ourselves. I don't think any human actually feels that that is what they want in life. You actually want to feel better. You want that sense of expansion that I talked about earlier, right? And so if your goal, for instance, is global warming, or your goal is some political cause, instead of like ranting and chewing yourself out and posting things on Facebook, it's all about, what is it that I can do as an individual that will actually help this cause? What are the practical steps that I can use, as opposed to just getting angry and emotional and spinning around in circles and never achieving things? So I get really, really annoyed at people who just want to yell and scream and rant, but aren't really actually trying to try something or achieve something, because that in the end is what we all want. We want change.
I'd like to ask you about vulnerability.
Okay.
First, I wanted to ask you, is vulnerability a seductive force? And secondly, in the 48 Laws of Power, it feels like an exercise in invulnerability when you read that story. But if vulnerability has this strength, how do we balance those two ideas?
Well, everything in life isn't black and white. And I make it very clear in the 48 Laws of Power that sometimes this law is exactly what you don't want to do. I have a reversal at the end, and I make it clear that there are circumstances where this law is complete BS. You don't want to follow it. You want to do the opposite, right? So everything depends on your context. And in a seductive situation where you're actually trying to seduce a man or a woman, or you're trying to seduce a group of people or a whole country politically or marketing, the sense that you are so powerful and invulnerable and aggressive and strong is actually kind of frightening, right? It doesn't, so seduction and influence is all about penetrating the defenses of other people, but them not realizing that that's what's going on. So if you're too frontal and aggressive, it's first of all obvious that you're trying to do something, you're pushing too hard, and it's also a bit frightening. But if you take a step back and you show that you're vulnerable, you show a degree of weakness, right? You show that you're not all strength. You have a bit of self-deprecating humor, which I always advocate. You kind of are able to make fun of yourself, or you're able to be critical of yourself, or you show that you can cry in a certain circumstance, or that you're not all that together, that you have vulnerabilities. Suddenly, with a person or a cause or a product that you're selling, people's defenses go down. They start opening up to you. They are now in the position of maybe feeling a little bit superior to you as you've opened up. And that makes them feel confident and secure. So in any kind of situation where you're trying to influence people, you do not ever want this to make them defensive and to get their back up and create more resistance. Your whole goal is to relax them, to calm them down, to make them feel secure about themselves. There's nothing ugly or manipulative about it, you know? So the great psychologist William James says, the thing that people want most in life is a sense of validation, a sense of recognition that they are a worthy person. People are desperately hungry for that. So if you're giving them the sense that they are superior, that they have great ideas, that their world is really interesting, you're giving them something that they want, and you don't have to be lying about it because everybody has something like that. And so even in the 48 laws of power, I have many laws there, not the majority, but quite a few laws that have to do with showing your vulnerability. So use absence to create honor and respect, taking a step back and letting people come to you, right? Play the perfect courtier, which means know how to be charming and things like that. And then use the surrender tactic, where you appear to surrender to the other person. Play a sucker to catch a sucker, which is kind of dim down your own brilliance and make other people feel like they're intellectually superior to you. Create an air of mystery, on and on and on. So there are quite a few laws in which I'm actually advocating for you to step back and to reveal some weakness, some vulnerability, because there can be power in that. Not in every circumstance. If you're the CEO of a very important business and you have to show a lot of firmness and strength, revealing that you're vulnerable and weak won't work in that circumstance. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve. But vulnerability plays a major, incredibly powerful role in any kind of situation of seduction or influence or persuasion.
I chose to bring that one up because of the way creatives work. You know, artists and creatives, their most powerful work is generally some act of vulnerability.
Right.
And so many of them get wrecked in the process. And what is the main thing that helps them understand that that's a healthy part of what they do, but it doesn't have they don't have to be wrecked by it. They don't have to be ruined by it.
Well, what do you mean wrecked by it? How are they wrecked by it? Do you have any examples?
Yeah. So, for example, the artist that realizes that they have to share something. They have something to share,
I
and
see.
then they take on the belief that they have to share everything, and it
Right.
and you know and it just sucks them dry of
Hmm.
they lose their identity, for example.
Well, so it's a very complicated question, but the way I would approach that is, you know, we're social animals, right? And so a lot of our behavior is a performance, right? We are actors in the world, right? And we are performing, and we're showing people certain traits, and we're hiding other traits, right? None of us is completely open. No one is completely open and completely vulnerable. We learn early on to hide certain things, to conceal, mainly to conceal our defects, etc. And so we are continually performing in life. And the thing that I think is important for an artist or for anybody in the world is to understand that you have to have some distance from that performer that you are. Not everything has to be personal. Not everything that you do is completely who you are. You take some pleasure in crafting a particular image and you're playing with it. That's a very, I'm telling people, using your appearances, using the image that you craft is actually a very important creative act that you are doing. And artists who are performers, like rock musicians, like a David Bowie or a Madonna or Beyonce, they create an image that is very compelling for people. It's not necessarily exactly who they are, right? They know that they have some distance from it. It is a creation. It is not something so personal. And when you're able to take a little bit of distance from yourself, and distance from yourself is extremely powerful in all aspects of life, because with that distance, you no longer take everything so personally, and you can look at yourself with a degree of detachment. So being able to say that this is a mask sort of that I'm wearing, I'm performing out there. And if people are getting all upset about it or they're criticizing me, well, okay, that's fine. It's not who I am. It's not really who I am. Who I really am, I only share with my closest friends, with my, my intimate partner, with my family, with my parents, right? I don't share the deepest secrets about myself to everybody in the world. And I think that's a trap that social media can get people into, where they think that the only way of getting power is to reveal more and more and more of the deepest recesses within them. And then they suffer tremendously as the things that they reveal, the soft parts of themselves, get attacked or people take it the wrong way. So you don't want to completely open up yourself to the world, right? You want a degree of distance. You want a degree of you're playing with an image and you're creating a persona. And that kind of protects you from all of the little bites that people will give you if you kind of reveal too much. Am I answering the question?
Absolutely. It, it reminded me of I went through a phase where I listened to a lot of interviews of Trent Reznor, the lead singer of
Oh,
Nine Inch
yeah, yeah.
Nails,
Yeah, sure.
and I was kind of amazed and delighted to realize these were fairly present day interviews. To realize that he referred to Nine Inch Nails as his day job,
Uh-huh.
and it that band is, it's such an identity for so many people.
Yeah,
And when he initially started, it was such a all-consuming identity of what he was. But
right.
the reality is, I mean, he's a extremely varied, extremely intelligent musician, businessman, just creative in general.
Yeah,
And I mean, I think at one time he was addicted. I can't remember what substance, but he was very really struggling with addiction, I believe.
hmm,
And I imagine he had to form some of that distance to get where he
yeah.
is now.
Well, to give two examples, one of them is I did a book with rapper 50 Cent,
Mm.
called The 50th Loves, my fourth book. And for that book, I met him and I spent about 6 months at his side, observing him in action and talking to him a lot. And when I first met him, I was a little bit intimidated because I knew the reputation, I knew the backstory. This hustler from the streets of Southside Queens who'd been shot in the head, who had kind of a thuggish image and everything. And then I met him. He was the nicest, sweetest person you'd ever imagine, right? So it's not to say that it's not totally real. And even with Trent Reznor, any of these people, there is definitely a deep layer of reality, but it's not the complete picture. So he's creating this kind of character, 50, that appeals to people. And there's a definite truth to it. He is a real gangster. He isn't one of the fake gangsters, as he calls them, right? He did come from the streets, but he's exaggerating it. He's giving it a slight quality that can it's a showman type thing, right? He's actually at heart, he's actually a very nice person. He seduced even my mother, even my 95-year-old mother. He's very charming. He's got a definite soft side that he doesn't try to show because it goes against his image. I'm also thinking of the great French politician. This is an idea that I always think about. named Charles de Gaulle. And Charles de Gaulle realized early on, as he became a famous general and then a great political figure, the president of France, he said that I realized at some point that in the public eye, I had to become quote unquote Charles de Gaulle. And what he meant by that was he had to be the person that people imagined him to be, this person who had rescued France, this tall kind of Olympian figure who was above it all. And if he wasn't totally really like that, but if he had to kind of play to what people wanted him to be to sort of create this aura of power, right? So sometimes you have to realize that you're creating something that the public wants, and you're creating an image, and you're a bit of a performer. There's an amazing book. It's a little bit on the more intellectual side that, to me, I've always loved. It's called The Fall of Public Man by the writer Richard Sennett. He explains this far more brilliantly than I ever can, how slowly we lost the ability to distance ourselves from the world, and humans became much increasingly narcissistic. But in the 18th century, for instance, the main idea was that everybody is in theater. You know, the world is a stage, the Shakespeare type thing. And we're all kind of actors in these plays. And he gives a very brilliant description of how this has completely changed in the modern world.
So, would you say that it's something that has to be explored as a matter of degree, where the the role is necessary both for the audience, but also because it gives you a little bit of separation from your work? But if you go completely into the role, that now you're vulnerable. But if you're completely disconnected from it, it's maybe artificial.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be too artificial or too fake, because there has to be a degree of authenticity to it. And I'm sure even for Trent Reznor or for great rock musicians, the persona they create has definite bedrock of authenticity. It is something very real to them,
Yeah.
right? So you're right, you need to have a degree of connection. But what I often tell people is have some humility about this. You don't, in the end, really know exactly who you are. We're born and we remain a kind of a riddle to ourselves. And as we get older, maybe we uncover some more truths about why we feel this way, about what the effect our parents had in our culture. But in fact, you're walking around and you don't really know who you are. So this idea that there's some kind of core true self that is you is a bit of a mirage, because a lot of what you think of who you are is a reflection of what other people think you are, is what social media thinks you are. You've been kind of programmed by the culture to have a certain image of yourself. You don't really know your own emotions. You don't really know why you're angry or why you're upset. You're a bit of a mystery to yourself. Yes, you know deep down inside certain basic things, but this idea that you could be 100% authentic, I find totally false and totally bogus, because you're never really, ever, ever, ever in life 100% authentic.
One of the greatest challenges I've seen for creatives, and it's one of the greatest challenges for me, hasn't been a particular set of skills to develop, or a particular one challenge. The challenge has been picking the subject itself. Do you think you could bridge the gap between what we were just chatting about and the idea of how a creative person can find their thing?
Well, it's a lot of what I deal with in my life and what I write about. In Mastery, the first chapter is called Discover Your Life's Task, and I have a chapter in the Laws of Human Nature on it. And I gave a TED talk on this subject. And the gist of it is I talk about myself, for instance. I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a writer. I'd say probably by the age of 8 or 9, as I fell in love with books, maybe a little bit older, but more or less in that area. And then, that kind of carries me through high school and college. And then I graduate college and I have to work. And I go, well, I want to make a living as a writer. I can't just write poetry, for instance. So I'll go into journalism, right? So I live in New York. I do journalism for about 4 or 5 years. And I don't like it. It's not me. It doesn't fit. It's not the medium that was meant for me. Everything is about what happened today. And then by tomorrow, it's forgotten. And I'm more interested in things that last, in history, etc. It wasn't a good fit, and I hated it in a way. So I dropped that. And then I lived in Europe for several years, and I tried to write novels, and I never succeeded. I never could make something coherent or last past page 100. I tried 3 or 4 different novels, and I worked at every kind of job to keep myself alive, but that wasn't working out for me. That wasn't the right medium. I wasn't disciplined enough for it, and it didn't quite fit. Then I came back to Los Angeles, where I'm from, and I went into the Hollywood and the film business, and I became kind of a screenwriter, writing screenplays. And I was not good at that. I didn't have success. I was a mediocre screenwriter, and I became aware of that. And so now I can reach a point where I'm 37, 38, and I can make money because I have some skills, but nothing is fit, and I'm depressed, very, very depressed. I have ambition and goals, but it's not working out. And then finally, in 1995, I met a man who was a book producer, packager. He asked me for an idea for a book. And suddenly something clicked inside of me. It was like the turning point in my whole life. I go, yes, a nonfiction book about power, creating all these things that I've learned through all of my different jobs, all the discipline I have gained as a writer, and all of the personal experiences I had. This is it. This is what I was meant to do. It was an incredible moment. And I gave a pitch, the best pitch I've ever done in my life. He loved it. And they ended up paying me to write the 48 Laws of Power. And then the rest is history. So the point of this kind of rambling story is that what matters as far as the thing that you're talking about or the subject is the degree of emotional connection to it, right? So the poet Robert Frost said, if there are no tears in the writer, there will be no tears in the reader, right? So if you don't feel something deep, if you don't feel the emotion, if it doesn't connect to you, the work will become sterile. It will become dry. It won't have life to it. And so the reason the 48 Laws of Power has had success is there's a lot of life in it. It has a lot of pain and bloodshed in there. My own pain and my own blood, the things I suffered in those 17 years of wandering, people playing all kinds of manipulative games on me, etc. There's real emotion behind the words. There's kind of genuine experiences that I'm trying to connect. So you want to find a subject or a thing that has that deep kind of childhood primal connection to you, where it connects to things that you feel. And I'm talking a lot about this in the book that I'm writing now. But get over this idea that human beings are these rational, intellectual animals. We are, in fact, emotional animals, right? And what makes great artwork powerful is the emotions that are conveyed. It gives us that kind of tingling sensation. Oh, that person has touched upon reality. Oh, that person is portraying the world and kind of how it appears to our senses in a way that's very real, right? It strikes us in the core, in the gut, and it gives us a certain sensation. And so you can't fake that. I'm sorry, I see books, I see movies. I read books, I see movies, I hear music, and I know that that's not in there, that this is just done for commercial purposes, that the person is just trying to make money, the person is just trying to pander. And yeah, you can make money doing that for sure. But the real true stuff, the great germ of your creativity comes from that stuff that connects to you deeply in a way you can't even express, So the subject that you choose is absolutely critical. It has to come from someplace deep within you.
We've referenced mastery several times.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that area. Could
Okay.
we start by could you define mastery? What is that idea?
Well, okay. So the sixth chapter, the final chapter of the book, is about what mastery means. And all the other 5 chapters about how to get there. And what mastery means is you've reached a level in your field. And I want to make it clear from the beginning that I am not prejudiced about what field you're in. It's not that I think that writing books is superior to writing music or to science or to working with your hands or to being an athlete. All levels of human endeavor have a level where you can reach mastery, okay? And so what that is, what they all have in common, sports, arts, politics, math, science, is that you have reached a level where you have so much experience, you have had so many ideas that have germinated in your brain, and you've learned so much, and your brain is this kind of rich ecosystem with all of these ideas and things that have been in there for so many years, that in your particular field, you don't have to think anymore. You don't have to, ideas come to you out of nowhere. You can be taking a shower and suddenly, wow, and you don't know where this idea came from, right? You can be playing chess and you don't have to think anymore about your next move because you've internalized so many patterns on the chessboard that the next move just comes naturally to you. Oh, I need to do this, and it's a brilliant creative move. Or you're playing the piano. You don't have to think about each finger on the keys. You just have a flow. It comes to you automatically. And what I say is what happens there is that there's a fusion of the rational and the intuitive. So the rational is all the experience that you've had, all the skills that you have learned, all the hard work and the practice you put in, years and years and years of it. The intuition is now you don't have to think anymore. It's at what I call your fingertips. You have a fingertip feel, and things just come to you. You have a feel for what you're expressing or what you're trying to prove or anything like that. And it just comes to you out of nowhere. It's not the same thing as an intuition that somebody might have that's not based on a lot of experience. Like, I just have this intuition that that person is a bad person. I'm not talking about that intuition. I'm talking about people who have achieved such a level of experience and knowledge that things just come to them in an instant, in a flash. And you could be an athlete. And I know a lot of athletes who reach this point where you don't have to think anymore on the football field or the basketball court. You just know from instinct, from intuition, throwing the ball there is the perfect thing to do for that moment. And so if it's working with your hands, you have a feel for the wood or for whatever it is that you're working in. And so the end of it all is the product that you're making, the thing that you're making, whatever you want to call that, if you're an entrepreneur, an actual product or an artist, it's inside of you. It's no longer this object out there. It lives inside of you. You have internalized it. The piano is inside of you. The chessboard is inside of your brain. The wood is inside of you because you have a feel for it and it lives within you. And all of the great artists and musicians and scientists have all expressed that they've had this sense of the whole idea has become internalized. It lives inside of them. So mastery is not something that's easy to describe because it's kind of a feeling that's so superior, that's so amazing that it almost eludes the language, like what a Leonardo da Vinci, kind of the icon for mastery. There's no way I can actually verbalize what it must have felt like to reach that level, but I try the best that I can to describe it in the way that I've described it just now. And one final thing I'll say is, I wrote the book because I want people to understand that work and discipline and building skills might seem ugly and tedious and drudgery, but it's in fact incredibly beautiful. It's something well worth spending even 10 years of your life working at and grinding at, because the feeling of mastery, of having that sensation I'm talking about, is so satisfying, it's so fulfilling, it's so beautiful that it's worth aiming at in some point in your life. And in writing mastery, I'd written like 4 chapters of the book, and the publishers was getting very antsy, saying, Robert, you're way late. if you don't deliver the book by March, we're going to postpone publishing it this year. I didn't want to wait any longer. So I had 3 months to write the 2 most important chapters of the book, creativity and mastery. And normally I would take 3 months to write half a chapter or something like that. And I worked so hard that I actually had that sensation that I'm talking about.
Yes.
Things were just coming to me out of nowhere. I was writing about creativity and writing about mastery, and I almost didn't have to think anymore. These ideas just came to me, and it's the most exciting sensation you can have. It's very fleeting. You know, it's what that one psychologist called flow. It's a very beautiful sensation. It's very fleeting, but it is eminently worth, if you're in your 20s, to think about that you want to reach that kind of level.
I completely agree with you. That mastery is it's a magical sensation, and I'm gonna start with an image. So the classic version of this image is the person that wants to be a movie star
Yeah.
because they see somebody on a red carpet smiling and you know, getting their photograph taken, and then they realize that the reality of being a movie star is lots of sweaty costumes. I think that in some degree, when we look at those images and we think that that's what we want, I think that our brain is trying to add up some image of mastery because we all want some degree of mastery. Because it is so magical,
Yeah.
and I think that that classic example of the person that thinks they want to be a movie star, but then they realize they actually just want to walk on red carpets. I think that's somewhat the desire for mastery. So my question inside of this is, how do we find that beauty in our work, particularly at the beginning? I mean, it's a, you know, a much harder question at the beginning, but how do we at least teach ourselves that we're moving in that direction? Did that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's not an easy question to answer because you're often going to take false paths in life.
Yeah.
And like I took my false paths, as I described it, with journalism and novels and screenwriting. But the thing you have to realize is if you have an overall sense of what you were meant to accomplish, you know, you at least know that music is your field. You at least know that writing is what you want to do. You at least know that science or math is what you were intended to do. Then you have license to do a little bit of wandering and to occasionally take a false path. And it's good. It teaches you a lesson. It teaches you, this isn't what I was meant to do. You have to trust your instincts a little bit. Things have a feeling to it. So when you're doing the right thing, when you're doing something that fits who you are, that is in your wheelhouse, that connects to what makes you an individual, what makes you different, to what you loved as a child, there's a feeling to it. It's almost like this is how it was meant to be. It's like swimming, you know, you're swimming along, you're not moving against the tide. There's a kind of a flow to it. You've got to trust that feeling. Now, nothing is ever going to be perfectly like that. So when you're 22, 23, and you're just learning the ropes, you have to learn a lot of the skills that are involved. And that feeling of that flow and that swimming thing isn't going to happen maybe as often as you'd like, right? But trust the feeling that this it doesn't fit, that I am frustrated. So there are 2 forms of frustration. There's the frustration where you're headed in the right direction and you're impatient and you're not quite getting what you want. That's a healthy frustration. That means you are on the right path, but things aren't going easy and you have to just persist and you'll push through it. Then there's the frustration where you're not on the right path. You were meant to be a writer and you ended up in law school. And this is a much more existential frustration where you're learning law and damn it, you're just tuning out. It doesn't mean anything to you. You kind of hate it. That is unhealthy frustration. You have to listen to that and go, this isn't what I was meant to achieve in life. And if you follow that path of going to law school because somebody told you to do that, you maybe can push through it enough and in your 30s become a good lawyer, etc. But eventually when you're 38, 39, you're going to burn out because it isn't who you are. It's not what you really love. And you're going to hit a wall and bad things will start happening to you. So you can sense the difference between these two frustrations. The one is kind of like the work itself is kind of frustrating me. I know where I want to be, but I'm not there yet. Okay, that means you're probably headed in the right direction. Just push through, or maybe make a slight change. Go from journalism to this and try this other avenue. But if you feel that overall existential frustration, which makes you depressed, which makes you question yourself, which makes you think, God, I don't know what anything means anymore in life, that is a sign that you are following the wrong path, right? And so it's all a matter of kind of trusting your own feelings in this way, because that's the only guide you have. If you listen to what your parents say, if you listen to what your teachers or your colleagues or your friends or your bosses say, you're going to make all kinds of mistakes because they're not inside your body. They don't know what's really going on. You have to feel what is happening. And I tell people, frustration and disliking something is often the best signal you can have in life, because it means this is what I was not intended for. It's information. So I learned early on that I was not intended to work in an office because I hate it. And so that narrowed my options down, because to be a journalist, you have to work in an office. To be a screenwriter, you have to work with 12 other writers. I hated that. So I learned that I really need to be someone who works for myself. So listen to things that you dislike, listen to your frustration, listen to the things that bother you, because they're information, they're signals about what is the correct path to follow.
What about the folks that struggle with getting excited about an idea and then finding themselves, a week later losing enthusiasm? Is that part of the process? Or of, they just need to go through more things? Or is there's something missing there?
Well, there's once again, it comes back to what I said just now. There's two kinds of things. So let's say you're a writer and you're writing a novel, or and you've chosen a particular subject, and you're starting out, and it's a couple weeks, couple months into the process, and this isn't working out. This isn't connecting to me. I don't like it. It could be one of two things. It could be you chose the wrong subject and you need to drop it. You need to get back to something that really matters to you. Because as I said earlier, if there's no tears in the writer, there'd be no tears in the reader. It has to be something that comes from deep within you that will really connect to people. And so you gauge yourself in that moment and you go, I'm writing something that has to do with my own family, and it's not working out, but I know that there's something there. I know that there's like something interesting, there's a kernel of truth. All right, maybe I have to step back and reevaluate it. Maybe I have to think that I have to shape it in a different way and approach the subject from a different angle. Or maybe you determine that the reason I'm hitting this block is that it's not a good thing for me to write about this subject right now. It's dangerous, or it's going to leave me emotionally vulnerable, or it's not the subject that I should be attacking in the moment. So it all comes down to trusting your feelings. So I hate to make it something so vague. I wish there were something more scientific that I could approach here. But when I write books, so I finish a book like The 48 Laws of Power, and the initial instinct, intuition is to write my next book that's kind of a sequel to The 48 Laws of Power, 48 Laws of Power Part 2. That'll make me money. Okay. But it won't make me happy. It doesn't connect to who I am. It's not the subject that interests me. The subject, as I'm writing The 48 Laws of Power, that interests me is seduction. And that's not what people expect from my second book, but it's what I want. I'm going to follow that, right? And I've done that for every book that I write. If I don't feel like it's what's right at the moment, it doesn't connect to me, then I can't do it. Because to make anything worthwhile in this life, to create great music, a book, a new business, a podcast, it's going to take months and years of your effort, right? Depending on what field you're in. And if it doesn't connect to you, if it isn't right, you're never going to have the energy, the momentum to get up that hill so that you can reach that downhill point where things just start moving smoothly. You're going to keep falling back down like Sisyphus with his rock because you never have enough momentum to push up there because you're not connected to it emotionally in a deep way. And so it's just very, very important to sense that this is the subject that I need to be attacking right now. And the other thing, I remember what I was going to say like 20 minutes ago. A lot of what I think is powerful creatively for people is kind of your dark energy. In the laws of human nature, I talk about the shadow, the dark side, the kinds of emotions and things that you felt when you were a child, when you were 2 or 3 years old. You were a little bit violent, you were a little bit aggressive, you weren't this sweet little angel, you hadn't been socialized yet, right? There's this kind of dark energy inside of everybody that we've all learned to kind of tamp down and become a nice, agreeable, polite person, right? And that dark side, that dark energy contains a lot of creativity behind it. It has a lot of energy and power behind it. And for me, my dark side is a bit of anger. So I know I'm on the right direction if I'm writing something and I can get a little bit angry about what I'm writing, because there is something real, it's something churning inside, it's something in my core. Because when I'm angry, I write the best. Controlled anger, not ranting, right? So, that kind of energy inside of you, if you're able, like a lot of rock stars are, to kind of communicate things that most people are afraid of. It's a little bit taboo. It has immense power behind it, right? It connects to you in a deep way, and it'll connect to other people in a deep way. So I guess I keep coming back to this kind of mystical notion about how things feel to you and how deeply you connect to them. But having experienced it personally, that's just about the best way I can express it.
With this idea of choosing what you're going to do and sometimes losing enthusiasm for something you thought was the right idea. With what you're saying, would you say that sometimes the answer is yes, we need to set it aside, and then the other times it's look more deeply into it to find a more nuanced version of it, to find your desire inside of that?
Yes, I mean, oftentimes to make anything worthwhile, you're going to have those moments of lack of enthusiasm. So some people have the misguided notion that everything creative should be fun and exciting, and you should have enthusiasm. It should be bubbling over with all kinds of positive emotions. And that's just not the case. There's a lot of pain involved. There's nothing worse than looking at an empty page where you have to suddenly fill it up with some new idea or something, or starting a musical piece from nothing. There's anxiety involved in creating anything. So you have to be able to distinguish the difference, and it comes with a lot of experience, I'm afraid, between those moments where you're losing enthusiasm because it's a bitch to actually finish something. It takes a lot of work and hard work, and certain days you're just not in the mood, or sometimes what you're writing isn't working. I have it all the time. And what you need to do is you just need to push through. You need to keep attacking it. Sometimes you're stale and you try too hard, and then you need to put it away, And oftentimes this is a very common experience among creative people. You say, I can't solve this problem. I give up. It's almost like a game you're playing with yourself. Then the next day, after you've given up, the right idea comes to you. It's because you've stopped trying so hard, but you have a lot of things going on in your brain. And then the moment you let go of the frustration and the kind of you just can't do it, ideas will come to you because now you've loosened up a little bit. You're not even trying anymore, and the solution will come to you. So there are one of two ways to go. Sometimes you need to push through. That's kind of the method I have when things aren't working through. I just keep going and going, going. Eventually, it'll solve itself. Or you can let go and give it a day or a week, and probably things will come to you. And if they don't, maybe it just never was going to happen. But then there's the other moments where you've chosen the wrong subject. It's just not the right thing for you to be doing right now. And you should just leave it alone. And what will happen is, it's a kind of a weird magic almost. But if it was something you were meant to do, if it was something that was right, that's in your wheelhouse, that's your power zone, you'll come back to it. The idea, the way to solve it, will come to you a month or a year later, and you'll come back to it and you'll try it again. And if it never does, it was never meant to happen, right? Because, it's just something that you thought of. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is, a lot of the times the things that you choose to create in any field, you have to decide, did it come from me or did it come from the outside? Am I doing this piece of work because of what other people have told me I should do, right? Is it because of what the culture is doing, the new trend or whatever is happening right now? And this is what I'm doing it. Are you doing this work for external purposes because other people are telling you, other influences are drawing you toward this, or does it come from inside? There's often a mix, sometimes it's things in the culture that actually do connect to you. Great. But if it's completely external, if it's something that other people have told you, if it's something that the people in the industry said, you've got to do this film, you got to do this book or whatever, but it's not you, isn't from you, you're probably going to be reaching that point where your enthusiasm dries up, you hit a wall and you're frustrated because it isn't what you were meant to do, right? So step back and go, when you reach that moment, am I doing this because it's something I've always wanted to write about or create? Or am I doing it because other people are doing this and this is what I thought would be cool or marketable?
We've come back to this idea of the feeling of what we want to do multiple times in different ways. How does one start to practice? Because this is something that, it's a, I mean, I didn't listen to myself for years. And I mean, when you aren't listening to yourself, you hardly know that it's happening. You hardly know that you're not listening. Let's say somebody is getting to a point where they realize that this is something that needs to be done. We need to listen to our own preferences. We need to listen to that inner voice that is honestly much more intelligent than our thinking voice. Um, how do we begin?
How do we begin what?
Maybe a better question would be, how could one practice listening to those preferences?
Well, if I had the answer to that in a neat formula, I would be a multi-billionaire because I would solve everybody's problem with a simple formula. But it's not easy, and I know it's not easy because I consult with people often, and not so much now because I'm so busy, but in the past. And it's the main problem that a lot of people have in life. They say, Robert, I don't hear that voice. I don't know what I was meant to accomplish in life. I don't really know who I am. I don't know what my life's task is, or I have a vague idea, but it's not strong enough and I'm not sure about myself. And it's not easy. I wish there was like an easy answer to it, but basically what I can tell people is we have to go back to basics. And I tell a simple fact. When you're born, I talk about this in Mastery, your particular DNA never has occurred in the 4 billion years of life on the planet Earth. No other organism has your DNA, no other human, and nobody in the future will ever have it. It's a unique string of chromosomes that is uniquely you. And it's a very powerful thought if you think about it deeply enough. And it means that you are wired genetically different from anybody else. The difference might be subtle, but you're different. Your parents, nobody else in the world has parents like you. They stamp on you certain influences that make you different in another way from everybody else. And then your experiences are unique. All of that adds up to the fact that you are different from anyone who's ever existed. And that difference, whether it's small or great, is the source of your power in life. That is what you want to connect to. What makes you different, what makes you weird, what makes you unusual, what makes you not fit in. And the problem is we humans want to fit in, we want to conform, we want to be comfortable with the group, and we become afraid of that difference and that uniqueness. So once I hit that in your brain, that your difference, your weirdness, your uniqueness is your source of power. All right, now let's work backwards. Okay, so let's go look in your childhood for signs here. Can you tell me things when you were 4 or 5 years old or 6 that excited the hell out of you, that were so much fun, things that you wanted to do or things that you tried? Do you have any clues when you were 11 or 12 of subjects in school that suddenly got your brain stirred up and you got you all emotional and excited and animated you? On and on and on. Then as you get older and maybe you enter the work world, if I'm dealing with someone a little bit older, are the things, as we discussed earlier, that you really dislike? Were there subjects that or situations that you cannot stand? All right, let's go into that. And then I say, when you look at a newspaper online or you go surfing for some subject, is there any kind of subject out there that immediately grabs your eye, that makes you so excited you have to read about it, right? I know for me, I can't explain why, but anything that has to do with early human ancestors, like Neanderthals, Denisovans, or early Homo sapiens, or cave art, I have to read about it. I am so excited. It seems like the most interesting thing in the world to me, right? And I've come back to that now in my work. I explore a lot of that stuff in my work, right? Are there subjects like that that grab you, that you have to read about? It's like we're like Sherlock Holmes here, and we're trying to solve the puzzle, the riddle that you are, of what makes you different. And these are various pieces that are hidden in your early childhood, that are hidden in your early years of schooling, that are hidden in your college, university years, and in your early years working in the work world. I compare it to a voice that's inside of you that's saying, this is who I am, this is what I was meant to be. And that voice gets drowned out by your parents, your teachers, your friends, your colleagues, your bosses, the culture, social media, until you can't hear it anymore. It's disappeared. It's drowned out by everything else. Let's try and get all that bullshit out of there. Let's try and get rid of all what everybody else has said. Let's divorce ourselves completely from social media. What is it about you that we can uncover in your past and in present that gives us a sign of what deeply, deeply excites you and deeply motivates you? Once we have that, it's like magic, right? And so if people are 21, 22, it's easy and it's wonderful because, all right, you were meant for a career in music somehow. We know that. That's what you love. That's what got you going when you were 5 years old. Okay, we've determined that. Now you have to choose a career in music in some sort. Let's choose here from the panoply of things that are out there. You could be a producer. You could be writing lyrics. You could be learning an instrument. You could be whatever genre of music that excites you. You could be a lawyer in the music industry. I don't care what it is. Let's start figuring out what branch is right for you and go explore and try it out and see what's going on. If you're older and you've tried other things and it's not working out, okay, you can't completely give up what you've already done because you have experience and skill in some field, but it wasn't connecting to you. Is there any way that we can now slightly make a change, and maybe you go to school at night, or you in the internet and at home, you learn other things, and then slowly we have a plan for how we can divert in this other direction still maybe using the skills that you've already accumulated, you know? But the key to everything is a degree of clarity about yourself, about what makes you different, right? And the goal is the goal, the end game here is that you create something. You create a work of art, music, a book, a business that reflects your uniqueness, that is totally you. There's nobody else on the planet that could do what you're doing because it's so much who you are. That is the source of power, and that's the end game. And we're going to try and get there through this process that I described.
Earlier, you mentioned tapping into some degree of the sensation of anger when you
Yeah,
were writing, and feeling a connection to that darker side of yourself as an idea that you're on the right track.
right.
As we go through this process, we as we go to these earlier memories, as we go to these things that we really really want. I think a lot of it sometimes is connected or even pushed into our shadow self, if you will, our emotional dark side. Just to add another aspect to this question of how does one practice going into that with it being such a dangerous feeling like such a dangerous place.
Well, it's not a dangerous place. So, what they talk about, like the great psychologist Carl Jung, is an integrated shadow. And so, what we mean here is this shadow side. And I was talking to a great psychologist yesterday. He said, you put a group of 2-year-olds together and they're kicking and they're hitting each other. There's nothing more violent than a 2-year-old, right? And, I can remember with my own sister, I could be really sweet and nice to her. And then the next moment I'd be pulling her hair or putting something really nasty in her soup or something to make her vomit. I was pretty aggressive. I was pretty, manipulative and violent and also sweet. That's the complete person that you are. The real danger that you faced is not understanding your shadow. It's in denying it, right? It's in saying, I don't have a shadow. I don't have a dark side. I'm a decent, nice, wonderful human being. Everything I do is right. I have only good intentions at heart. I'm a saint, I'm very moral. I'm upright, etc. Yada, 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 yada. In the meantime, that shadow part of yourself that you're trying so hard to keep down, and every single human being out there has it, right? But you're just trying to deny it, repress it, keep it, pushing it down. Suddenly it'll pop up in your 30s or 40s, and you'll do something that is very dangerous, is much more dangerous than if you gave into it. We see that all the time with political figures or people in the news, where they suddenly do something or say something that gets them in all sorts of trouble. They get canceled or whatever. And we go, that's really strange. That kind of behavior isn't what we thought, expected from them. They could be saying something really stupid, or they could do something, or a 60-year-old man suddenly runs off with a 20-year-old model or whatever and ends up ruining his life. So it's because you've been trying to repress it so hard that it comes out later in life in all kinds of behavior that you can't control. And the first thing a person will say in those situations where they're literally caught with their pants down is, that wasn't me. That's not who I am. And what we say when we talk about the shadow is, no, that is exactly who you are. That is you. That is more you than the stuff that you were trying to hide. So the danger comes in life as you get older that you don't recognize your own shadow. You don't recognize the dark emotions that every human being has. You don't recognize the envy that you feel. You don't recognize your own aggressive impulses. You don't realize that you love to have a degree of control over people and that you're practicing it in kind of hidden ways, okay? Once you look at your shadow and you realize I have this, and this is who I am, and for me, my shadow is various. It's that kind of anger that I have and kind of my aggression and my ambition. It's also the fact that the opposite, in a way where I try too hard to please people. These are elements of my shadow that go down deep inside to my earliest childhood. And I'm not going to get into why that occurs, but knowing that this is it's a part of me, that aggression, that anger, that ambition, it's a part of me. I can now recognize it, and now I can control it, and I can channel it. And that's what we call an integrated shadow. So what does that mean? That means if that is your dark side, I can now channel it into my work, into my writing, and it gives it energy and power and force. I've learned to embrace it and use it, and I put it for constructive purposes. Or let's say there's a cause I really believe in, and I'm really angry about global warming or about wealth inequality or whatever it is. That anger can now be used for doing something for the sake of justice, for a cause that is really important to me. I can channel it into something productive. If I'm an athlete, this is very common for athletes. I'm very aggressive and ambitious. I'm a Kobe Bryant, I'm a Michael Jordan. I channel it into beating everybody else on the court. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not killing anybody. I'm just being the best basketball player on the planet. I am so determined. I hate losing. I'm going to win every game. You're channeling it in a productive manner, right? If you're an artist and you have that anger, putting it in your work, in your music, whatever it is so powerful. It's amazing how people will relate to it, because we all have these kind of repressed sides to ourselves. And when an artist expresses what we are all repressing, we're drawn to it like bees to honey. It's like, wow, that is so exciting. Even in politics, if you're able to kind of appeal to people's dark side in some way, that can be a very negative thing. It can be, that is where it can become dangerous and counterproductive. But it can also be used in productive ways as well. And we've seen examples of that, where there's a cause that you unite people in front of, like a Martin Luther King for civil rights, or Mahatma Gandhi for India's independence. That takes a lot of anger and motivation and ambition to do it. So that's what an integrated, healthy shadow is. It's not dangerous at all if you recognize it and you say to yourself, how can I use that energy for productive purposes?
The initial fear of the exploration of those inner desires is that there will be collateral damage, and that, you know, it will end up harming people. And I think there is some collateral damage, but
What do you mean by the collateral damage?
well, let's say the anger example. You know, somebody that's hasn't
Yeah.
tapped into the anger for years and years and years, and they realize that they need to communicate that anger. You know, at the beginning, there's this sort of gas brake uh action that starts to happen, where you know, somebody might, you know, express too much in a situation where they don't want to, and then they stomp on the brakes, and you know, that can result sometimes for some people, I think, in you know, relationship tensions that we fear. But not going through that seems, it's so much more dangerous. um
Yeah.
it's so much more dangerous.
Well, you're not just simply venting your anger, and you're not bringing it into your personal relationships
Yeah.
necessarily. I mean, there could be a way to do that as well, but that's a whole other subject. You're using it for your work, and you have to realize that you want to control it. So if you're somebody that's been repressing your dark side, the chances are you're not suddenly going to just let it loose,
Yes.
because you're already a little bit afraid of it. You've already been trying to tamp it down. But now I'm saying, look at it in yourself, recognize it. It's like another person that lives inside of you, and embrace it, even hug it. I hate to use so stupid and new agey, but just kind of embrace it in some
Yeah.
way, right? And then the next step is to incorporate it in somehow in your work. And you'll find, if you're just angry and ranting and violent, the work won't be any good. There's no control over it. An artist knows how to organize the material, how to make it coherent, and how to express it. So bring your artistic desires to kind of shape something for the public and shape your anger and make it constructive. Sometimes, in music, for instance, a pure jolt of that anger can be very powerful and effective as well. So there's reasonableness in that. But in general, so I talk about in my seduction book about charisma and the charismatic figure. And one of the people I talk about is Malcolm X, the great African American civil rights leader from the 50s and 60s. And Malcolm X had an incredible amount of anger and resentment in him. He was a small-time hustler in Boston who got arrested, was put in prison. And then in prison, he started reading books that enlightened him about the world and what was really going on. And he determined that he was going to change his life. But he had so much anger about the racism in America, about what he suffered unjustly. And he discovered that when he got out of prison, that when he just ranted about all the anger, it was too much, and it didn't work, right? So his community, they didn't want just like pure anger. They wanted change. They wanted something constructive. And so he learned that if he channeled that anger, if he restrained it a little bit, if he talked and this audience could sense that he was angered, he didn't blast it in their faces, but if they could sense an undercurrent of anger to him, that he was controlling it, it was 10 times more powerful than if he vented it, right? Because it meant he was trying to restrain himself, but it came through anyway. Is a really powerful way of expressing it. And I know in my books, you don't notice the anger. People won't read the 48 Laws of Power and go, wow, that's an angry writer. But if I make you aware of it, you can maybe sense it. So I have channeled it, I've restrained it, I have put it into a form, and that's what you're kind of aiming at.
That restraint is powerful across so many different things. The thing that came to my mind is a singer. So, there's when a singer is really on their game, there's almost always a sensation that they could go farther, but they don't.
Yeah, right,
I mean, it's the same thing when you see a surfer. It's the same thing when you see an actor expressing sadness. It's never all the way.
right,
It's I'm choosing to communicate this idea. I
right,
and therefore it's not just a random thing flying through the universe. This is a choice.
right.
And it's something about that establishes a clarity. I think one of the most charismatic things I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm reading research for my new book. I'm reading a autobiography of the great writer Vladimir Nabokov. And it's about his childhood. And between the lines, if you read it, you know his history and how much tragedy occurred when he was younger and how it intersected his life. But he doesn't discuss it in the autobiography. But there's this sense of sadness that kind of permeates the book. And you kind of feel it as you read it. There's some kind of longing for a world that has completely disappeared, which is the world of his childhood. But if he had opened himself up and just kind of talked about how sad his childhood was, it's like it's too much in our faces. It's too obvious and it's kind of off-putting. It's like he's wallowing in it. But the fact that he never mentioned all the tragic occurrences, but he kind of suffused it with this sad aura about the work. And we have this feeling that we're discovering as we're reading it, that this is his true emotion. That is 100 times more powerful than just simply sitting there whining about all the horrible things that have happened to you.
I want to be conscious of your time.
Okay.
I wasn't sure where we were going to go, and I'm thrilled with where we went.
That's always the
um,
best.
yes, yes. Do you have any parting thoughts for the person that is considering tapping into these different ways of thinking, tapping into these ideas where, it's kind of scary to decide that you're going to do what you want to do, not what you think you should do. It's kind of scary to go, next door or dive into these, stronger, sometimes considered to be more negative desires, but not always the case. Do you have any last thoughts for somebody like that?
Well, you're only alive once, YOLO. So you only live once, sorry.
Yes.
Um, and you have much more to lose in life by following a false path. And you don't realize it when you're in your 20s because you're young, you have energy, you look good, you dress well, you've got friends, and you could be in the wrong career, but you're still having fun. It's okay. And then in your 30s, the wheels start to grind a little bit more slowly. And now you kind of realize, what am I doing in life? This job that I have isn't what I was meant to do. I don't know, I feel kind of lost. And then maybe you start drifting into drugs, or you start drinking, or you start drifting into some little wormhole on social media, some cause, and you get kind of angry and bitter. And then you're in your 40s and you're getting by, but it's not satisfying. And now you're headed on a path of something very self-destructive and very ugly, right? So it doesn't mean when I talk about mastering your career that you have to be an Einstein, that you have to be a Beethoven or a Jay-Z. Okay, let's all be kind of realistic about this. We may not be able to reach those heights. Okay, your goal could be just to be a great business person and to eventually create a business that's really good and has success. Maybe you won't be Jeff Bezos, but you'll have some success and some fulfillment, right? Maybe you'll write a book and it won't be as successful as some other people, but it still will be something that means a lot to you, right? Or maybe you were meant to just be somebody who raises a family. That could be a form of mastery. And that's what you were meant to do because you are at heart a social person and you have a great deal of empathy. But if you don't realize early on what that thing is that you were meant to do, and you follow a false path, you're in for a lot more pain and a lot more danger than kind of going. So I tell people a common dilemma that you face when you're 22 and you're just out of the university is you're offered two jobs. Let's just give a scenario. One job is at a business, a company like a Google or something that's going to pay you low six figures. Wow, out of college, I'm going to get, low six figures, and you get this cushy environment and it's really great place and everyone's having fun. Or you're offered this job for 30,000 a year where you're just going to be on the edge of starvation in a city like New York. But it's a startup and there are only 5 of you there. And you may not make it, but it's something that's very exciting and interesting. You make the right choice by taking that lower pay because in the larger company, what's going to happen is you'll make the money, but you won't learn as much because you're one of 10,000 people there and you're kind of swallowed up in that culture, right? And then the money becomes an addiction to you and you're 23 and you think, I have to be making $100,000, $200,000 every year or something's wrong, right? You get sucked into that wrong path. But if you choose early on, you make the right choice. You choose that company for 30,000, where you're going to have the best education in the world. You're going to be hands-on, learning about marketing, learning about programming, learning about, the finance and making a business. That's worth 3 MBAs from the best schools on the East Coast in the Ivy League, right? So you make the right choice that learning and getting as much experience and skill, that's what you want in life early on, right? So your choices when you're in your 20s are going to be critical, whether you're going to be seduced by money and by what other people say, or you're going to follow the path of getting skill and experience in a field that excites you, right? And then eventually you're going to be on this trajectory. But one path leads. So in that first, the scenario I just painted, you're going to be making less money. You're going to be suffering. You're going to be eating like, boiled microwave ramen in your studio apartment in New York with their cockroaches, right? As opposed to like a 2-bedroom East Village flat and the doorman, etc. But living that $30,000, first of all, it teaches you kind of have being poor when you're young is actually a good thing. It teaches you about how to use money, the importance of money. It teaches you to be frugal. And it's kind of exciting to have that kind of life for a while, right? It toughens you up, right? So the pain that is involved, the suffering, the perhaps questioning whether I'm doing the right thing, perhaps not having as much money as you wanted, it's all for a purpose so that when you're in your 30s, you're now prepared to do something that will shock the world. You'll create something really beautiful because it connects to you and you followed the right path, as opposed to kind of going into something that's comfortable, that your parents like, that other friends are doing, and then hitting that wall in your 40s and things will kind of fall apart. So I try and scare people about that, about people who don't connect to their work, because it will never end up good if you follow a trajectory where you don't connect to your work. It can never lead to anything great.
This has been wonderful. Do you have any place that you would like to send people online? And what are you working on
Well,
right
one thing I
now?
want
What
to
would
do
you
is I
like to
want to
tell people?
plug the Daily Laws,
Oh,
which is the
please.
book that just came out. And the Daily Laws. So let's say you're new to my work, you haven't read any of my books. This is my 7th book. Um, what I've done here is it's a collection. It goes through like a calendar from January 1st to December 31st. And each day has a passage from my books, kind of short and to the point, like basically a page, which contains like kind of a clear idea of my philosophy, my way of looking at the world, which we've been discussing here today. And it's organized in a certain fashion. So the first 3 months have to do with mastery in your career. The next 3 months have to deal with power games and manipulative people and toxic people and that kind of thing. The next 3 months have to do with persuasion and influence and seduction and being strategic in life. And the final 3 months are about understanding human nature, people, and understanding yourself. And then the last month is kind of about the new book that I'm actually working on now, which is about the sublime. And I can't really go into that, but that's sort of in the month of December. And each day is kind of make you think about these things. And it's going to kind of alter your attitude towards life. It's going to make you more realistic about knowing who you are, about the people you deal with, and about what's going on in the world. And that kind of attitude to me is like the source of power in this world. And so, and in that book, you'll get a taste of all of my other books in there, and you'll say, huh, I don't like any of Robert's books. I'm never going to read anything by him. He sucks. Or Mastery really connected to me. I think I'm going to try Mastery first. Or the 48 Laws of Power, that's really me. So it'll give you kind of an idea about which book to go to, but it will also help ground you every day in kind of this realistic, practical way of approaching problems in life. So I want to do a little plug for the Daily Laws. It's been out a month now. And then my website is robertgreeneofficial.com. And the hashtag or Instagram is at robertgreeneofficial. And that will have all the links to my Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, your world, right?
Yes.
You're the great maestro of TikTok, no?
It seems to be quite an adventure
That's what
that's
I was
happening for me
told.
there. Yeah,
That's what I was told.
it's become quite an adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have been dubbed by some people the king of side profile.
What is that?
Because I read scripts off as on video. So I am turned to the side of the camera like this.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that about
So
you.
yeah, so I have a rather different way of presenting ideas, but yeah, it's my writing that I present, and it's
Oh, exciting.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to check it out. I'm sorry I haven't done that before. I've been very busy, but I'll check it out.
oh no, but yes, it's been a marvelous adventure, and yeah, I've enjoyed your work on many platforms, and I really recommend anybody listening to please check out Robert's books, particularly, and anywhere on social. I have immense respect for the type of writing and just all of the writing that you have done, as well
Thank you.
as I mean, you've had a big influence on me and helped me as many of the tools that you've presented have been things that have been of great benefit in my life. So thank you.
Wow. Wow, I'm very excited to hear it. Thank you so much. That's sort of what I live for when I hear things like that. That's great. And I'm sure at some point you're going to be writing a book, right?
Yeah, so I wrote the first draft and I originally titled it Mastery, and then I looked up Robert Greene again and decided to choose a new title.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm working on it. Hopefully it will get published soon. But yeah, I'm working on ideas around basically pulling in what you work on so that you're not constantly reaching outwards for new skill sets,
Yeah.
but you're actually putting boundaries on them so that you can learn to
Oh,
play in a particular space.
I like that. I like that idea.
Yeah, because what I've found, and as a wildly open personality that likes lots of different things, is mastery isn't really available to us a lot of times at the edge, where
Yeah.
there's nothing that we're familiar with, right when we're overwhelmed by the chaos of it. I mean, there's a version of it, right? The athlete that's pushing right to the limit of what they can do, but
Right.
but but in a guitar lesson, when you're constantly learning the lesson, there's no time to play inside of
Right.
music
Right.
that you know,
Yeah.
and oftentimes that's the beautiful place. So
I
yeah,
see.
yeah, that's the ideas that I've been
That sounds
exploring.
very exciting.
Yeah.
Well, once you change the title, um, keep me updated as to, its progress and maybe send me a copy of it. I'd be very interested.
Absolutely, and I promise, title is already changed. We
Oh,
won't use
okay.
that. We won't use
Okay.
that. But yes, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it. Great discussion.